Greetings everyone, just in the kitchen doing a little bit of cooking. Thought I would just come on and make another quick video for this week. By the way, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share, all that kind of stuff, always appreciated. Anyway, I sold my old 6th Gen i5 Levano ThinkBook, and it's yarn, and I wanted a bit of upgrade. I bought an 11th Gen i7 XPS laptop. I just wanted to upgrade, get a little bit more cores, a little bit more power. I think the ThinkPad was only dual core, and this one has got 8 cores, so it's a lot more powerful, and allow me to do better work in my I've just installed Mint Linux on there this time instead of Ubuntu. Obviously Mint's a variant or an offshoot of Ubuntu, or however you want to call it. But anyway, but it got me thinking about how disposable technology is now, or how people dispose of it quite quick. And I paid not a lot of money for this. I mean, compared to what it was, I think when they come out, it was probably 5 times more than what I paid for it, and they're only about 3 years old for 11th Gen, something like that. But yes, you could go buy the latest Ultra 7 i7 laptop, and it is faster. I think on the pass marks it's about 5,000 more points. So yeah, I was looking at a 10th Gen i9, and that was 9,000 points less than this 11th Gen i7. So it just goes to show how improving it is. And I think the improvement between the 11th Gen i7 and the new Ultra's i7, which is what the 14th, 15th Gen is, isn't as vast as say between the 10th Gen and 11th Gen, for example. And even between the 11th and the 12th, is only like about 5,000 points as well. The 12th Gen is very close to the Ultra when I was doing all my comparisons. Anyway, I'm waffling on. Yeah, it just makes me think of how throwawayable technology is, what people do with technology these days. I remember my first laptop. It was a 386 16. I mean, years ago with a grey 16 scale grayscale screen, something like that. I remember playing a flight sim at the time, and you just saw a trail as the plane went past you. When there's really old flight sims, it's like a trail of the plane that went past you. It was funny. But I remember not the first laptop I had for work, because obviously I had laptops for work before this one, maybe a couple of years before, and that was like a 233, I think, something like that. But I remember the first laptop after the first laptop I bought, sort of, or it would be the second laptop I bought, to be fair, if you count the SX16. But I actually swapped that for another computer, so I didn't really buy it. But the first one I actually paid money for, well, I think at the time I paid about £1,000 for it. And I remember it was an AMD, and it was the first one of the 64-bit processors they did. It was one of the first 64-bit processors that came out, and it was an AMD. And I had that for a few years, to be fair. But I do remember it used to get very hot. Not so much a laptop, maybe a tabletop, because it would burn your lap if it was on your lap. But yeah, I used that for quite a number of years. And back then, even though technology was progressing, as I say, it was the first 64-bit, and then they went into like the dual core, quad core, and so on. Processors. I'm having I think one of the first quad core I think I had was an AMD, not an Intel, to be fair. Or was it an Intel core? I remember having a Core Duo, which obviously is a 2-core. Anyway, I think the first quad core I had was an AMD, actually, so I had AMD quite a lot. But yeah, back then the technology was less disposable. You had a bit longer, but I think it's because the jumps were far smaller than they are now. When you go from like let's say 10th to 11th is a good example, and not so much now, but the jump is considerable in the processing power and the cores. I mean, even now, I think this one is maybe an 8-core, 16 thread, and I think if I remember rightly, and I think like the 12th is like a 10 or 12 core, and then the latest one's the the ultras are something like 16 core. So you know the technology jumping a lot quicker now than it did, and so therefore it probably makes it why technology is more disposable now. But back in the day, it was less disposable because the jumps were far less. However, as a developer and for coding, I don't really use laptops for gaming, although I know you can get gaming laptops. But as a developer, a 2-3-year-old laptop will give you just as much power, you know, for development wise, running VS Code, for example, as the latest one. The one I sold, the old ThinkPad, less so, because with dual core running newer applications like VS Code run a little bit slower. So you do get, you know, the sort of newer laptops are better. But and also it depends on the processor. I remember having an old XPS 13-inch 7th gen, but it was one of the lower megahertz processors, because one thing I noticed is you get the bigger processor, like for example this is an 11800H, and then you get like the ones which are only like 1 point something gigahertz, megahertz, gigahertz, yeah, 1.7 gigahertz, isn't it? 1700 megahertz. Which are, I mean, my work laptop's the same sort of thing. It's a ZBook, but they have these lower. I think they take less energy, but they're lower speed processors. So you know you have to watch out for that. And I think the ThinkPad suffered with that as well. It was a lower speed, lower power processor. But yeah, the i7 I had previously, the 13-inch, was a 7th gen one of those, and it felt considerably slower than say a fuller processor, shall we say, more speed to it, like a 2.4 gigahertz, for example, 2.7, whatever it is. But yeah, I'm waffling on too much now. But yeah, it's just, I was just going to say, it's amazing in my eyes how much more disposable technology is today than it used to be. Even though most work companies will make you have the same computer for 3 years, but as a you know, user, as a personal user, people do dispose of their technology quicker these days. But anyway, enough of me waffling. That's for this week. How long do you keep your technology? Do you dispose of it quickly? Do you keep it for years? I used to be in the dispose of it quickly and change every year. I'm knowing they keep it for several years because I find I don't need the newer processors these days. So that's all for this week. I'll speak to you next week. Bye for now.